this could be the first of a series of boycott.
English football leads a 4-day boycott of social media by Sport.
The whole point is to hurt them quite badly.
The PFA's Simone Pound takes us inside the meetings as players challenge social media networks on racism.
We had Wes Morgan in the room talking kind of from a personal level. There was the N-word everywhere, monkey emojis everywhere, and they were like, "We're really sorry, it doesn't contravene our community guidelines."
On Sport Unlocked, the battle against hatred online. Hello and welcome to the podcast digesting the best of the week's sports news with analysis and interviews. And we'll have that conversation with Simone Pound of the English Players Union coming up. We'll also have Arsenal takeover talk, Premier League TV rights latest, and of course the fallout from the collapse of the Super League. Plus there's an update on the situation around the Tokyo Olympics. I'm Rob Harris from the Associated Press, and alongside me after a bit of a quieter week this one, Martyn Ziegler from The Times.
Yeah, it is, but still lots of fallout from the Super League shambles. And one thing we have had is it's been the most successful podcast that we've ever done. Last week we had an emergency one when the Super League was launched, and then one wrapping up all the fallout. And we've had listeners tuning in from all over the world, and I'm really pleased to have everybody on board. And we'll be analysing what's happened now, won't we, with the man who's had to go to hiding down in deepest Cornwall, Tariq Panja.
Hi guys. It's hard to get onto this podcast to launch a European Super League. I've been all over. I've been all over Cornwall trying to get a signal to get in touch with you guys, but I hope we've got there in the end. And also, happy Kevin Keegan Rant Day. 25 years ago today, we had the Love It broadcast from Kevin Keegan, the iconic image of him with those headphones jabbing his finger at Sir Alex Ferguson. And, I would love it if we can get through this in one piece.
Without ranting at each other. I mean, unlike the Super League, we have actually managed to form an alternative communication strategy to bring you on the pod this week.
Remarkable. Well, good job, guys. I mean, there might be a job for you if the European Super League Mark II goes ahead as Florentino Perez seems to insist it will.
Well, before we do get on to the Super League, because everyone's heard so much from us on that in recent weeks, one of the places where we broke the top 50 of all sports pods is in India as well as Italy. It's been a pretty harrowing week in India with the ongoing and worsening coronavirus situation, which has impacted the Indian Premier League.
Yeah, it's devastating news and images from India. They're running out of places to burn the dead over there. There are makeshift funeral pyres all over the country. New Delhi, the capital, in fact, it's one of the worst affected areas. It's just all very sad. Hundreds of thousands of new cases a day, thousands of deaths. Meanwhile, this cricket competition is going ahead. Organisers say the public need a bit of a distraction from that grim news, but it is for some people quite galling that this event, the razzmatazz of IPL, goes ahead while the country burns. Some players have talked about how harrowing it is for them. 3 Australians have already left. The English contingent remain there. Martyn, it's really, really complex and very sad at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult one for the organisers about do they cancel the tournament, do they press ahead with it? I mean, I think we saw back in this country in England when the lockdown was announced in January, you had the former Football Association chairman David Bernstein saying the Premier League and Football League should be stopped. It didn't seem right. And I'm sure lots of people saying the same thing about the IPL. I mean, I do actually have some sympathy that there is that although the people are suffering and families are suffering and the last thing they want to do is think about cricket, that it is actually arguably a very important part of people's lives there. And if it can provide some sort of I think distraction may be the wrong word, but some sort of ability to take some sort of interest in something other than the terrible situations that is going on. I do understand why there is an argument for that to keep going.
And a determination for Tokyo to keep going in terms of planning for the Olympics and the Paralympics this summer. But this week we've had some updated guidelines in the playbooks in terms of the conditions that participants in the Games will have to meet, and that will require a lot more testing at the Olympics and Paralympics.
Yes, testing every day for the athletes, and also coaches, people who in close proximity with them. Other things like they're only going to have only spend 90 seconds on an interview with a journalist. They can't go within a meter of people who've been in Japan for longer than 40 days, i.e. basically to try and limit any contact between people coming into the country and people already there. I think from the Japanese point of view, there's a big effort to try and reassure the population they're not going to be put under any extra threat as a result of the Olympics, because there is so much opposition within the country to the Games actually taking place. So I think we'll see what happens in the next month or so about whether things get. I think if the situation worsens, it's going to be a real threat to the Games actually happening.
And we've only got a month now until another big sporting event, the Champions League final in Istanbul. And only this week, Turkey has entered a new 3-week coronavirus lockdown to try to bring the number of cases down. And yet, UEFA are insistent that the final will still be going ahead in Istanbul on May the 29th. Of course, the 2020 final should have been in Istanbul. They had to abandon those plans, and they still hope it will be there now this year. Of course, it could still be an all-English final if Manchester City and Chelsea get through. Imagine making all the teams go across from England to Turkey for that one, and fans potentially too, because UEFA are still hoping for fans at this year's Champions League final. And Tariq, you've actually encountered a crowd in the last week, quite unusually, at least outside a football ground.
Yeah, following on from fans of Liverpool on Monday last week for their game against Leeds, and Chelsea fans who took to the streets before the Brighton game to protest at the European Super League, Arsenal fans came out in numbers, and you know, for the Emirates, it was quite a loud atmosphere outside the Emirates. There were fans demanding Stan Kroenke and the Kroenke family leave their club as a reaction to the ESL, but also, I guess, a general sense of ill feeling towards that ownership group, who the fans, many of the fans, believe aren't the best custodians for their team and don't really care about its fortunes. And that heralded this news that the Spotify founder is interested in buying the Kroenkes out. You know, arguably, these things usually happen quietly. You don't hear about deals often, the real ones, until they're done. But the Spotify founder took to Twitter, first of all, to say he'd like to buy Arsenal, is ready to talk. I don't know why he didn't pick the phone up and contact them. He's a billionaire after all, and I would assume that the Kroenkes would take a call from someone like that gentleman.
Sport and Lots, of course, we are on Spotify, so Daniel Eck can be listening to us to get some observations and insight on sports news. And Martyn, you know, you look through some of his background, and yes, he's an Arsenal fan. He's not particularly active on social media in terms of talking about Arsenal, even though he is very active on Twitter. And no actual formal bid or clarity over where we'd get the money from for it.
No, he appeared on a business channel this week to sort of spell out his plans a bit more. I mean, the Kroenkes have said they're not selling. It's a slightly strange figure, isn't he? I mean, to a lot of people, he is not a good person. If you're a musician, for example, there's lots of controversy about the fact that Spotify basically feeds off their product and actually pays the artists themselves tiny amounts. I mean, I don't think we're going to be retiring anytime soon from our 0.0001p per listen on Spotify, to be perfectly honest. So it'd be interesting to see where this one goes. Generally, takeovers playing out in the public domain don't happen. This may be different. We may be in a new era where takeovers are done through the realm of social media, but you'd feel slightly sceptical about that.
Rob, there's also a question mark about how much and how he's able to fund this. Yes, he has stock options in his company Spotify. He's the founder, but he still has a share, which fluctuates with the stock market, about 3 billion. But again, how much cash does he have? Can he fund this takeover of Arsenal? Should the Cronkies decide to actually open negotiations with the guy? He says that he has the funds available to him, but there's still quite kind of a lot of question marks about this. And given the week we had with ESL about billionaire owners, etc., and the future of football, isn't this just more of the same?
Yeah, there's no indication why Daniel Ek should be a better owner, in the sense of, he's not worth personally tens of billions of pounds. He doesn't have huge amounts of disposable income, so it would still need to be run as a business. There'd still need to be some financing there, wouldn't there, Martyn? And this week you just looked at the wage bills of teams as well, then from the latest finances.
Yeah, he, of course, I think the Arsenal fans like him or some do, because he's a supporter, and he started supporting when he was 8 years old when Anders Limpard joined Arsenal, and that does strike a chord. But that, as you say, that provides absolutely no guarantees. And yes, if you look at the wage bills, Arsenal are way behind now. The four clubs above them. We've seen Liverpool put their results out this week, which means that for the first time this century, they are now actually got a bigger wage bill than Manchester United, and quite significantly bigger. So it's Manchester City, the top payers, 351 million, Liverpool 325, and then Manchester United 284, Chelsea 283. And then Arsenal are down at 225, and Spurs 181 million. So that's there's some big differences there. It just shows Arsenal have a lot of ground financially to make up if they want to start competing at that top level.
Both of you, I wonder if some of those wage figures, particularly the Manchester United one, is due to a lack of success at Old Trafford. I think the Liverpool figure, for example, must have been boosted by the bonuses they would have had to pay for recent success. And perhaps that number will diminish now that the team has had a kind of dreadful current campaign. It'll be interesting to see what happens next year. And should United finish in the top two and go great guns in the Europa League, etc., maybe that will be reversed. It'll be interesting to see how these wages are paid and delivered and promised to the players.
Yeah, it's been noticeable, actually, and we're going to talk about it later in the show about social media abuse. Obviously, we face a lot of it, nothing like, on the scale of being received by footballers. But some of the Arsenal fans, one messaging me, "You're a disgrace to human existence," just because we were sort of slightly scrutinising the potential interest of Daniel Ek and, various other insults and abuse. And Tariq, you've not just felt it on social media, you felt full force of a Spanish publication as well in the fallout from the Super League, where there seems to be quite a lot of delusions in Spain, and certainly backing in parts of the media for the ill-fated Florentino Perez project, and still backing him up on it.
Yeah, very, very odd on a number of levels, both personal and in general, the kind of tone in some of the Spanish press. But yeah, it's kind of got targeted by a pretty trashy tabloid in Spain that, accused me of being in the pay of La Liga to go after Florentino Perez's pet project. All sorts of outlandish claims in that particular article. I won't mention the publication. I don't think it deserves it. any more publicity than it already gets. It's a bit of a rag. And yeah, there were some bizarre elements in that, including the fact that it was astounded that I could write 4,000 words in Spanish. The answer to that is I could not. The New York Times employs some excellent translators, and they'll be pleased to know that their Spanish is flawless, given the comments from that particular journalist. But in general, it's kind of been very visible what elements of the Spanish press are generally supportive with the big clubs, Real Madrid or Barcelona, depending on where they are, and whatever they do, there seems to be this unquestioning devotion to the needs of the presidents, particularly Florentino Perez. He could do no wrong as far as they were concerned, even though he appeared in that illusional, strange midnight interview that, again, was one of the final nails in the coffin of the ESL as far as the other members were concerned. There was just almost no criticism of him or his project.
And to be clear, of course, we did have a statement from the New York Times published saying that it was all rigorously reported, is based on interviews with various executive officers and directors with direct knowledge of the Super League conversations. Our readers value the rigor and independence of the New York Times journalism. We stand behind our coverage. Some of the key components of the piece you did in particular were saying about how La Liga president Javier Tebas discovered about the Super League plans from Joan Laporte, the Barcelona president.
Yeah, and that's just a general course of reporting. That's what you do. You work your contacts, use the phone, and you speak to as many people involved, and found that was one of the more interesting elements, that this contact that Tebas had with Joan Laporta at least made him think this thing was credible and could very well go ahead. And it was one of the reasons why he sounded the alarm, one of the first to sound the alarm as far as the other stakeholders were concerned. It's a detail, an important detail that we thought was relevant, germane to the story, so it was included. I mean, there is a fascination and a fixation in some parts of the world for conspiracies and underhand behavior, etc. This is a case of kind of shoe leather reporting. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we can't knock on doors. So you call, you text, you try and speak to as many people as possible to get a composite idea of what happened and report it as accurately as possible. That seems to not be understood by some elements of the Spanish press, unfortunately.
They might be trying to cut off. They might be trying to cut off your internet means of making those calls, given our challenges speaking to you today.
Of course, the Perez and Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, AC Milan are still not formally withdrawn from the Super League, which I think is probably some sort of tactic to try and at least keep open the window of possibility that they can get some financial compensation back from the 8 clubs, including the 6 English clubs who did pull out because they'd signed up to a legal contract. I think they may think that they have some sort of legal case for getting some money back from them.
Well, there could also be legal issues affecting the 4 clubs who've not fully dissociated themselves from the Super League idea. Real Madrid, Juventus, AC Milan and Barcelona. The UEFA president Alexander Schäferin telling me in an AP interview that the clubs have got to choose whether they're Champions League or Super League. They can't be with both. Martyn, what prospect of a ban? How legally enforceable do you think it would be kicking them out of the Champions League?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. I don't think a Champions League without those 4 clubs, although they'd be slightly diminished, I don't think it's impossible at all. But I think they'll accept defeat sooner or later. One of the interesting things is that if they have this idea of bringing some sort of legal action to get money compensation back from the rest of the dirty dozen, I think they're going to struggle, because if you look at football statutes, UEFA Statute 61 says you cannot sue another club. You can't go to court. You have to do it through football's bodies and then the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So it seems to me it's going to be a bit of a non-starter if they think they can get some money back from the other clubs. So I think they'll just have to sooner or later bite the bullet and realise that they're going to be out of European football's top competition unless they just concede defeat and realise that what they've done has been an absolute disaster.
And also an area creating intrigue still is just what was said in Downing Street days before the Super League announcement when Manchester United's Ed Woodward was there. He was there for a meeting with Dan Rosenfield, the Chief of Staff, but he also met Boris Johnson, and questions over, did the Prime Minister in any way indicate support for the Super League? It's denied by Number 10, but still many unanswered questions.
Yeah, I mean, Number 10 have stated that the meeting between Ed Woodward and Rosenfield, which was 4 days before the launch of the Super League, was to talk about the return of fans. Now, the Premier League, who's been leading on the return of fans, was not informed this meeting was taking place. They were surprised that the return of fans should have been on the agenda, given the fact Ed Woodward had not spoken to them specifically about the return of supporters. And the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, which is leading on the return of fans for the government, they were unaware of the meeting as well. So it's very strange that particular meeting should have happened, and with nothing which came out of it to any of the bodies who are actually organising this. And no wonder for that reason that there's been a degree of scepticism around the fact that this was supposedly the topic, when actually other sources have said, the Sunday Times reported that Woodward was given some sort of idea that the government would not step in, and that it was deemed a football matter if a Super League was formed. Of course, as things turned out, the government perhaps saw an opportunity to come on board and oppose it and perhaps win some votes in a way which many people may not have expected.
Well, the Super League might be dead for now, but the New Look Champions League is still due to come in 2024. Much criticism from managers about going from 6 to 10 games per team in the group stage, but it does look like it's happening. There are still things to be decided. How to allocate those 4 additional spots. Do 2 still go to clubs based on historic record, their coefficient, and just what happens to the sale of TV rights, which the ECA, led by Agnelli, wanted to take control of. It looks less likely to happen, but some things still are in play about this New Look Champions League format.
Yeah, quite a lot of it's back in play. I think those 2 extra places going to big teams or historically significant teams, which is a code word for the big teams, I think that has to be off the table now. They've been talking about punishments, etc. This surely would be a gift to people who try to break the competition in the first place. And it shows that the small and middle-sized teams are being listened to, and also the leagues. Those 2 extra places, or the 4, should be going to perhaps champions of smaller national associations. After all, it is the Champions League. And I think UEFA has always been fairly open about sharing custody over the commercial rights of the Champions League and other European tournaments with the clubs, but it won't want to willingly hand them over and essentially privatize the competition in favor of those big clubs. So that commercial question, that should be resolved too. Let's hope they figure out a way of ending these interminable, dreadful talks soon.
I think the way that the wind is blowing to the football authorities now has been so underlined by Richard Scudamore, the former Premier League chief executive and executive chairman, who's been speaking to this new YouTube channel called The Overlap. And he's basically saying life will never be the same again after the Super League, especially in England. He thinks the actions of the 6 have altered the dynamic forever. Things will change, and they've basically they've overshot the mark, and that he now shows that this UEFA, the Premier League, and the government will provide a regulatory block which will withstand any breakaways and given power very much back into the hands of the football authorities. So yes, I think for things like the coefficient places, that's going to be removed now, and UEFA will be very, very confident that they can keep control of the TV rights themselves.
Martyn, it's interesting that you mentioned regulatory blocks. We've already seen Italy enact a rule change. The Italian Football Federation had an emergency meeting on Monday in which they essentially outlawed any club that signs up to a breakaway league of any type from playing in domestic football ever again. Essentially a Super League block. And one of the signatories to that, it was unanimous, a chap called Beppe Marotta, who is the chief executive of Inter Milan. Inter Milan, of course, one of the breakaway clubs. So, yeah, we're already seeing action or legislative action in a sporting sense, and maybe we're going to see something more concrete from the authorities, be it at a national level or a transnational level with the European Union for those countries that are still in it anyway.
Britain, of course, no longer in the EU, and the Premier League has been asking the British government, in fact, whether it can approve extending the current terms of the TV deals domestically. Tell us more, Martyn.
What's emerged this week is that the Premier League are looking to effectively extend the existing broadcast deals with Sky, BT Sport and Amazon for the same amount of money, which is really a sort of win-win for all parties. It means that the Premier League don't risk getting less cash, and it means that the broadcasters don't have to go into an auction where they may lose out. And we know from Sky and BT Sport that Premier League football is vital for their business model. So this needs to be signed off by the government, but it's looking likely they will do so because they think it's important for the football pyramid. This actually may also be linked to the fact that BT is now looking for a potential buyer for its BT Sport arm. They're in talks with a number of broadcasters, including Amazon and DAZN and Discovery, and it could be that they think the fact that they've got this nailed on, or potentially nailed on for the next 3 years, is a good selling point for anyone who wants to buy the company.
Turning now to the big talking point of the week, and it's the 4-day boycott of social media led by English football. The cause picked up by FIFA, UEFA, also other English sports like cricket, tennis and horse racing. They're all deciding to stay off Twitter, Instagram, Facebook as part of a protest against the action that they're struggling to get the social media companies to take to eradicate the racism, the discriminatory abuse that is so prolific at times on their platforms and are seeing players being targeted. Well, someone who's been working on behalf of the players, trying to pressure the social media companies to take action, is Simone Pound. She's the head of equalities at the Professional Footballers Association, and she joins us on Sport Unlocked. Welcome, Simone. How was it putting together this boycott? All the English football bodies working together in a united way?
We meet weekly on this issue, so it's something that we've kind of come together on for the past few months. And the idea of a boycott has been mooted for some time, but I think it was the clubs really who led in terms of really wanting to boycott, the EFL clubs particularly. And then the Premier League clubs, the Premier League spoke to their clubs and they came on board. So once we knew we had all of the clubs on board, we were all committed from an authorities perspective. But yeah, the clubs have come on and it's all systems go.
And what has the communication with the platforms been like up until now? I mean, it's been years. I remember talking to someone at the Premier League saying, yeah, we're in a lot of contact with these platforms. Why do you think they have been unable to do it? They're able to get sort of terrorism-related stuff off immediately, sort of more incendiary stuff, personal stuff away. What's the issue with the platforms?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I think personally, I've been in kind of forums and meetings with them for 8 years or so. I can remember meeting colleagues who I still work with today at a meeting a good 8 years ago. I think the Enough campaign really brought everyone's attention to the platforms. And since then, which was in 2019, we've had quite regular dialogue with Twitter and Facebook, who obviously own Instagram as well. And in terms of why they're not able to find the solutions, I mean, they talk a really good game. There's a lot of platitudes and, concern that it's not what they want to see on their platforms and that they're, committed to change it. However, given the kind of financial powers that the platforms have, the technology that they've got on hand, the expertise that they have, and the power that they've got, you would really have hoped that they would have found some solutions by now.
Is the sense with the social media companies that they just want to do enough they can get away with to placate football and to other sports bodies rather than sort of going above and beyond? I mean, we see it on things like Instagram where they have their statements which are very narrowly often focused on direct messages rather than actually the open messages, as we see so often. It's the monkey emojis replied to old posts and things like that players are getting.
I mean, I don't want to talk from a platform's perspective because I'm really definitely not there. And I do feel for the people, well, I don't feel for the people, but I'm working with the people who are talking about, their commitment, however strong their commitments are, actions aren't there. We've seen with Instagram a recent improvement in their direct messaging model, and that's great. That's great, but it's a very small step in a massive, wide-scale problem. So we need to see a lot more of those small steps.
How do you feel about this idea that we've seen from Facebook and Instagram that, what if somebody posts something racist, that's not an immediate banning offence. They say, oh, they need sort of another chance to learn from their mistakes. Because a lot of people I've spoken to just think that's extraordinary.
I can't bear it, Martyn, to be honest. It's dreadful, isn't it? The fact that when we first went to them after the Enough campaign, I had reams and reams and reams of example of the abuse that players are receiving. We had Wes Morgan in the room talking kind of from a personal level. There was the N-word everywhere, monkey emojis everywhere. And they were like, we're really sorry, it doesn't contravene our community guidelines. And I think over the course of those 2 years since we first met with them, they appreciate that, that isn't a good enough response or answer. However, we're still seeing and know that those words, those emojis are being used in a horrific way daily to players, and they aren't always being taken down quickly. Sometimes they're still up 6 months after being reported. It's staggering, to be honest, in this day and age that we're going through this and talking about this. It's awful.
Can we drill down on that meeting? So Wes Morgan is in a room showing messages that are blatantly racist, and someone from was it Facebook, Twitter, I don't know, has said that doesn't breach our community guideline. That was 2 years ago.
Well, we have to sit through lots of presentations with them talking about, the commitment that they have, tackling hate and what contravenes hate and hate speech, and the fact that they're a very global company and there's many forms of hate, whether that's, horrible child exploitation or terrorism. So, they're kind of managing the user's experience in terms of our users, our players' experience, and putting it in that context and kind of giving it a very wide global issue. Then talk about the N-word and the fact that it's used in the US, kind of in a peer-to-peer way and within certain genres, obviously hip-hop, and that they wouldn't be able to stop the N-word, and that, in terms of community guidelines, basically, I'm afraid that's the stories we get. I've had members of my team who have literally said, I literally can't meet with them. I can't meet with them. It's too painful. But we've pushed on and we've pushed ahead, and there are small solutions, like we've said about the Instagram thing. And I'm hoping that what the boycott does this weekend is push forward even more to get more and more stuff done, basically.
What's the sense of the anguish and concern you get from players on match days, after match days? Are you getting sort of messaged with all this abuse and racism they're getting, and are you really seeing up close how it affects the person receiving the racism?
Yeah, definitely. And whilst I think people are really keen not to be considered victims, there's a real kind of feeling that they're not victims, because then by being a victim, you're losing your power and you're not empowered. However, there is a massive emotional impact. And whilst I think current players with their mindsets and mentality and psychology are kind of geared to succeed regardless of anything, we're looking on the other side. Obviously, Anton Ferdinand had his documentary recent BAFTA winning. He's being really helpful and powerful in this space using his voice. We've had people like Karen Carney talking about the impact of their well-being. And yeah, I think I know that it's having a massive impact on people emotionally. We've got a wellbeing department, a wellbeing team within the PFA, and we've had to implement a wellbeing helpline. We're working really closely with the player care teams within clubs, because that emotional side of things has to be taken really seriously. Everyone's in a really fragile state at the moment. We've had a year of lockdown. It's, the abuse is on their phones, in their homes constantly. It's going to impact anybody, of course it is.
The key to this boycott is how it affects the social media platforms. I mean, my sort of impression is actually it's going to hurt them quite badly.
I mean, the whole point is to hurt them quite badly. And personally, I'm really keen for the impact to hit them financially, because I think that will have an effect more than anything. So brands like Adidas withdrawing funding that they would have spent on social media over the weekend is absolutely fantastic, and just really what we want to see. And having the really big broadcasters and brands supporting the boycott will hurt them. It will hurt them, but it's got to hurt them financially and hurt them enough to have a significant shift in their policies, rather than hurt them and then they come back with platitudes to say we're hurt.
You were part of the joint letter from the PFA along with all the other bodies to Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey. Was there ever actually a reply from them, or a willingness to hold any sort of talks from the top level? Because you're not just some small entity. This is English football, one of the biggest sporting entities in the world.
I think we've been disappointed with the lack of a response at the highest level, although there are kind of meetings planned, but not at that, not at that top level. But we do have regular dialogue with the platforms, and there are meetings on meetings. They work and sit within a kind of working group that we're all a part of. They say that they're very committed to finding solutions, but like we say, just not quick enough, not effective enough, and not soon enough. We need some really significant action soon.
Is the bill promised by the government, does that go far enough, or are there still measures you want to see the government do more to introduce?
Well, I think, again, the boycott will send a strong message to government. I think that online harms bill, again, in terms of how the platforms talk about their kind of the whole spectrum of hate, unfortunately, is massive. It's very, very wide. So we need to, from a football perspective, make sure that online harms bill is kind of has got elements that will protect footballers from social media online harms. And we've worked with the sports minister, with the Secretary of State. We're hearing a strong commitment to work with us in this space. And I think this is very much an opportunity, as we lobby for the bill, for government to understand the massive effect that this abuse is having.
We're hoping for the effect. What if they just ignore you?
We're not going anywhere. We'll keep pushing on with this. This doesn't have to be a one-off. We've had the enough boycott. This is everyone coming together. We can do this every week if we have to. We're not going away. They're going to have to listen to us one way or the other.
Do you envisage this potentially becoming a permanent boycott of social media by football?
I mean, that's a difficult one, isn't it, Rob? I don't. that is a really difficult one. I don't know if it would be a permanent boycott. However, I personally feel that this could be the first of a series of boycotts.
And what sort of research are you doing? How are you working with your counterparts in other parts of Europe, for instance?
That's really interesting, Rob. We're doing a lot of monitoring at the moment, so kind of working with data scientists, looking at trends, looking at patterns, looking at players' accounts and what happens around them. And FIFPro, who's the kind of worldwide European Union, are doing something similar. So we're in dialogue. I've got a meeting with them later on today. So it's just a case of just being able to monitor that. And I think that's something, again, that's kind of grown. We obviously did the one around Project Restart, but having that data and that information is really powerful, because I know it's really powerful because the platforms don't like it. We've just kind of got information that they'd rather that we didn't. And that was, again, when we had the Enough campaign, we said we need AI solutions, we need data. And having that data just means that we're not in a room with players with reams and reams of paper. We're actually able to give them kind of hardline stats and data and evidence.
And while obviously a lot of this has been focused on the racist abuse, and you did mention Karen Carney, that actually there is the general abuse and misogyny that affects players in particular, even as much as, you know, obviously very often, too often, when there's tweets about women's football and the ridiculous replies like "no one cares," and that will affect your members as well.
Yeah,
fully.
Of course. There's the racist stuff is horrific, but equally so are the death threats and the rape threats and the kind of wishing people dying of cancer. You know, there's some real horrific hate. And I should say as well, of course, we're the PFA and it is all about the players, but it is a wider societal issue. There are people, I know BT have done a survey and those responses are going to be coming out shortly, just in terms of it affects everybody. It isn't just something that affects football. It's a massive problem for most people online.
How rare would you be to hear a death threat aimed at a footballer?
I mean, a death threat is like the top level, heightened, like everyone, including the platforms, take it as seriously as it could be. So it's kind of top level. And because we've now got the Athletia monitoring, it's picked up instantly. And we haven't mentioned the police, but we're working closely with the police, and it's something, again, that the police would act on, and everyone would work to kind of deal with it. And really, to be honest, that's what we want to see across all kind of threats and harm.
Do you think there's a place for? There's a sort of civil liberties issue I know around this, about every social media account being able to be traced to an actual person, rather than the sort of people having this anonymous, be able to sort of set up an account anonymously, abuse people, and then when they can just like disappear and close their account and then never be found again. Some people think that actually social media platforms should demand that people give a proper name and address and can be traced. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that we're asking the platforms for. I'm not a techie, but if you think about how when you log in for online banking and you there's verification methods that you need to go through to be able to get into your account, and really we would like to see something like that for social media, and so that we can verify accounts. We appreciate what the platforms are saying is that would mean that maybe kind of like the lowest socioeconomic groups would be restricted from accessing, players and interacting with players. And I totally take that on board. However, like everything, we know that they have the kind of AI and technical solutions. There must be something out there. We're talking to people at the moment who are kind of bringing proposals, and I hope that we'll see that, maybe whether that's as a small pilot to begin with. But I think verification of accounts has to be explored more.
Simone, thanks for joining us and to get your thoughts.
Thanks, guys.
Let's get some assessments of that interview with Simone Pound of the PFA. Tariq, hope your line is just about keeping up there. How effective do you think the boycott of social media can be?
What stood out, I thought so her personal reflections or recollections when it came to the kind of feeling football players are suffering here, because the line about Wes Morgan trying to describe to social media executives in a room, show them messages, scores of messages, the racist abuse he had, and them saying, well, sorry, Wes, it really doesn't cross the line for us, our terms of service. I thought that was quite shocking, and it shows just what a journey this is going to be. It also shows how little they're willing to do about this. As far as I'm concerned, this boycott is going to get a lot of attention, important attention, but I think it won't make a dent on the social media companies, because if they wanted to do something, they could have. There's been horrific incidents, horrible headlines, and this is going to be a weekend that sort of highlights this stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, the will isn't there from those companies to do anything. I think they're thinking about the bottom line. And Simone mentioned she wants to hit them in the pocket. I still don't think this will have the impact I hope. The idea of these rolling boycotts seems a good one. Martyn, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm a bit more hopeful actually, Tariq. It can't be comfortable to be sitting in the headquarters of Twitter and Facebook and have this sort of incredibly bad negative publicity, and some of the biggest brands in the world say that they're not going to give you money, and some of the most your most famous followers boycotting you. Surely that must make them sit up and think, we've got to do something more here. Surely.
Well, they haven't done much more in terms of trying to explain what they're doing to tackle racism on their platforms. Apart from some written statements, we've heard no interviews, we've had no chance to question any officials from Twitter or Facebook, the owner of Instagram, this week at all. You think they'd want to offer those reassurances to players in particular who are facing abuse?
The European Super League approach to communications there from the big platforms, Rob.
Of course, they're welcome anytime they want on Sport Unlocked to discuss the moves they are taking to tackle hatred online. Well, that's about it for this week's edition of Sport Unlocked. Tariq, glad the line just about held up in its makeshift way, and you can go back to keeping away from the internet.
Rob, this has been an experience. Nice to be with everyone. I'm now going to try and find somewhere with no Wi-Fi and no phone signal, which is why I'm here.
Good luck with that, Tariq. Enjoy. Martyn, thanks a lot as ever as well. Great chatting.
Cheers, Rob. Bye, Tariq.
And thank you everyone for listening as always. If you're enjoying us, really grateful if you could rate, review and subscribe to us on whichever platform you're listening to us on. But for now, enjoy the sports viewing in the days ahead and goodbye.